Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on Industry 5.0. So we have our world famous speaker, Mr. Anthony and Mr. David Smith. First, I would like to give chance, Mr. Anthony.
Greetings. Okay, the fifth industrial revolution, the integration of human creativity and robotic precision, where humans and machines combine. Now, evolving technology has completely transformed our world. We are totally dependent on it. It has transformed various industries, including space exploration. It's been heavily transformed, space exploration. For example, AI has significantly improved spaceship management and operations thanks to its capacity to process massive volumes of data. AI-powered technologies enable spacecraft to function better, collect data, and increase mission success rates through autonomous navigation, data processing, and so forth. Furthermore, a little bit more, I'll touch on this. Image processing. AI algorithms are used to interpret and analyze images taken by satellites and space observatories, helping to identify celestial objects and learn more about their properties. I'll just touch on a few more points. For example, planetary geoscience, geological characteristics of planets and moons, such as craters, volcanoes, and other surface features, may now be found and classified by scientists using AI, using artificial intelligence. In-depth 3D representations of planetary surface can be created using this technology, which can aid researchers in understanding the environment of the past of a planet or moon. So it's multiple. There's so much it has given for us within this particular realm of space exploration. And for example, as well, galaxy and star modeling. We have AI based on algorithms that can find, categorize, and identify patterns in star and galaxy data. Means that astronomers can now map the universe with unprecedented clarity. So this robotic revolution has really revolutionized every sphere of endeavor, as I have just now mentioned, the whole nature of space exploration and so forth, what AI has done for space exploration, as I have mentioned, image processing, how AI algorithms are used to interpret and analyze images taken by satellites and space observatories, helping to identify celestial objects and learn more about their properties. So it has completely revolutionized space exploration as a whole. Now, going further, my only concerns when it comes to this robotic revolution is the whole notion of singularity, technological singularity, how machines could eventually take over. This has been echoed by the likes of Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, how machines will become super intelligent and eventually take over. So we have to have a balance here of all the wonderful things that AI has done for us, revolutionizing science in every sphere of endeavor within the medical domain and so forth. But there is the danger of technological singularity, how machines could one day take over. And as I said, this has been echoed by Elon Musk and various other people like Stephen Hawking, how machines will become super intelligent and we could have a problem. Now, my only objection to artificial intelligence is when it comes to manipulation of the mind. I have mentioned this before in some of my past presentations and in my books, my science fiction books, how AI could be used to scan our brains, nanochips in the brain that register all encephalic data, registering all encephalic data, and via special signals collecting that information and storing it in a giant supercomputer. So our brains have been completely hacked. And hacking into the brain is something that can be done by science. Thoughts are energy signals. The energy transmitting a thought there has mass. The ions and molecules encoding the energetic signal have mass too. Now, since thoughts are physical and have spatial dimensions, it could be possible to lock in and read people's thoughts via neuronal activity. So there's a lot of science based on that. Hacking into people's brains is basically decoding the logic of neurons and so forth. So these are some of the objections I would have with AI. And of course, I will mention in my next part some of the other things that I have difficulties with in terms of this robotic revolution and the potential dangers. So, yeah. Are you there?
Hey, Sharif, you're frozen, it looks like. Sharif, would you like me to go ahead and go on?
Yes, Mr. David Smith, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, Tony, thank you so much. Great examples of where Industry 5.0 and everything work, and I particularly like the space exploration one. Let me just pull up just a minute and come back and see what we have there. Is that we see the movement from really Industry 4.0 to Industry 5.0 is being a leap of going back and giving power to the individual people and everything. And, you know, Industry 4.0 really brought us smart technologies. That brought us the AI. It's brought us the cloud connectivity. It's brought us a lot of the real-time analytics. It's brought us the Internet of Things type of sensors. And it really is driving towards efficiency and productivity and beginning to tie together the cyber and the physical worlds together. What Industry 5.0 is about augmenting the digital transformation of putting these smart technologies at the center of manufacturing, supply chain, and retail. And it's using this transformation to build a more meaningful and efficient collaboration between the humans and the machines and the systems with the machines within this whole global connected digital ecosystem that we live in. And this partnership between humans and smart machines are really necessary because it really mirrors the accuracy and speed of the industrial 4.0 revolution in the industry area. And it will help us with more creativity, more innovation, and it will help connect the people with the cyber world more to advance the skills, capabilities, and competencies of all of them and how we begin to do it. You know, in Industry 4.0, it was about all different types of automation and advances in manufacturing, augmented reality. It was about robots, not the early robots that everything had to be programmed and hardwired for a Thomas robot box. It was about big data. And, you know, the headline data is the new oil is true, but you have to have refineries. And then not only do you have to have refineries, you have to get the human parts of them working to know what type of products to make, what are the things to do, and that's part of Industry 5.0. You know, cybersecurity, Internet of Things, modeling, simulation, digital twins were all things that were started in Industry 4.0 that have to begin to be enhanced in Industry 5.0. And you know, this human machine interaction really can be advanced considerably in Industry 5.0 with embedded sensors, machine learning technologies, you know, AI tools like natural language processing, others. The whole AI-powered robots have to begin to be built with more human collaboration. And it's going to help us begin to advance those to the next level. Same thing as you look at data management, the same thing as you look at digital twins and simulation modeling. This human interface to the machine interfaces of Industry 4.0, 5.0 are going to be very, very important for where we're going to it. You know, on Street Phone programs with yours, we spend a lot of time talking about augmented reality and virtual reality. And in Industry 5.0 is where things like the virtual reality and IR come together with collaborative robots, which come together with collaborative AI. That really helps us dramatically increase the functionality, the efficiency, the creativity, and helps us look at how we can solve problems in a different way under Industry 5.0. There's just so many types of things we're talking about with Industry 5.0 that I could go on for quite a bit, but it's really the fact that the Industry 5.0 helps us from a technology standpoint bring a human-centric into industry view into the Industry 5.0. And it puts humans and what we're trying to accomplish and the interactions at the center of the production process, and brings us new ways to do and how they can get it done. And it brings the capacity for where humans excel, for critical and creative thought, for critical innovation, and for the ability to think not just in the box, but out of the box. That is what Industry 5.0 is about, and how that type of human technology collaboration will be part of the earmarks of where we're seeing our future going in our digital age. So Sharif, opening remarks.
Thank you. Mr. Shackle, are you with me? Mr. Shackle. Mr. Robin Daly, what do you want to discuss about Industry 5.2?
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Good. I've been having Teams did an update and suddenly I lost all my microphones and speakers. So I finally got my headset working again this morning. So Industry 5.0, certainly in one of the major drivers from what I've seen, at least from the people that have been writing books on the subject, is automation and artificial intelligence. And what's interesting is the impact. And the folks that have done the research originally started off and argued that the impact on Industry 5.0 would be hourly workers. These are the jobs that are going to be automated. We're going to lose hourly workers in large volume, yada, yada. Turns out that wasn't the case. We had Baxter come to market that was a robot that was designed to replace hourly workers, manufacturing line workers. And it failed spectacularly in market. $22,000 robot that could replace a human, it wasn't cost effective. The cheaper hourly workers were actually cheaper than the robot was to operate. Subsequently, they argued that where the automation would occur is the other end of the spectrum. The most expensive people would be replaced first by artificial intelligence, which ironically puts CEOs in the crosshairs, because the most expensive employee that most companies have is the CEO. And when you're talking about compensation in larger firms that can exceed $100 million a year, and the training of a large language model is about $100 million. In theory, you could create a custom large language model to replace the CEO and then not incur the following year's salary, which does create an interesting dynamic. There was a Star Trek. It's not Star Trek. What's the name of the show? Twilight Zone episode years ago with Robbie the robot, and the entire plot line was a guy that was running a factory gradually replaces all the workers, and at the end, Robbie the robot replaces him, and he's out of work. But the researchers argued the exact opposite might occur, where the first large-scale replacement would be the CEO. Now, that doesn't take into account the decision tree, because clearly the CEO is not going to vote to replace himself, but it shows the economic impact and cost of developing the AI right now makes it more lucrative to put AIs in place to replace expensive workers than it does to replace inexpensive workers. Inexpensive workers are still cheap. Now, we could certainly argue that when you got a situation where hourly workers are cheaper than hardware, that maybe you're underpaying your hourly workers, but we won't get into that here. But that is something that will have to be resolved. Because the theory was sound. In other words, that when you go to automation for hourly workers, it should be cheaper, and the fact that it wasn't is a tad troubling. So as we move into Industry 5.0, the difficulty we're going to have is how do we repurpose the workers that are going to be replaced? How do we train workers who are set in their ways to use automated technology so that they're more competitive against the AI-based counterparts that are going to be coming to displace them, which is a significant problem. People don't like change. And getting people to use these AI tools is not that easy. The ramp of ChatGPT has been near vertical, but now it's starting to plateau. we're way below saturation levels. And I think it's a showcase of the fact that people, at least right now, are not significantly changing their underlying behavior. And to be fair, the tool itself isn't as well integrated as it will be in a few years. It's still more the exception than the rule that you're going to run into a generative AI tool in your day-to-day work. They're showing up. Microsoft is starting to throw them into Office with a premium attached to them, but that premium is steep. It basically doubles the charge per employee for an Office user, and while the benefit is there, the economic benefit justifies the extra cost. Getting an IT manager to double their Microsoft budget has proven historically problematic, as Microsoft discovered in the early 2000s when they did a pricing action to catch all the people that weren't paying for their stuff, and suddenly Linux went vertical, and we had a rebellion against Microsoft, and that rebellion continued over until Google replaced them as dominant for browsers. So it does showcase that perhaps the path that Microsoft's on with these high charges may have some problems getting to critical mass. But the overall part I'm talking about is the part we need to address. Is we need to address retraining and repurposing our labor forces, or we're going to have troubles. We're going to have large numbers of people that are unemployed that either weren't offered the opportunity to retrain, or chose not to retrain, and then will become unemployable. Now, we've been through this before. When we went from calculators and typewriters to word processors, a large number of people suddenly became unemployable because part of the resume when you're hiring was, did you know how to use Word or a number of the other tools that are out there at the time? And I remember when I was hired into IBM, it was early on, but I was asked if I knew how to do a spreadsheet. Thank heavens, because I did compensation for the Western region and I did it on a spreadsheet because the mainframe version of the program truly sucked. So that skill set allowed me to be performative, and it allowed me to displace people that did not have that skill set. I had predecessors that had used prior tools, and they were no longer in the company by the time I joined. We pivoted over to using these more automated tools, and the people that didn't know how to use them had been let go. So the critical need to retrain, bring people back into school, retrain them on how to use these generative AI tools to allow them to perform. Because if they don't, we're going to have something similar likely to have shortly with trucking. Currently with trucking, we're short in the United States about 200,000 truck drivers, which is really driving the impetus, the desire to replace those truck drivers with robots. You would think it would be because it's truck driving is boring. It's not particularly safe, and because going to higher automation would allow the truck driver to do more interesting things. That's not the drive. The drive is the fact they don't have enough drivers, and of course the Teamsters doesn't help here, and it's a cautionary tale for the riders and the actor strike going on right now. Is that the big drive for automating truck drivers, so creating robotic trucks, is the fact we just don't have enough truck drivers. And once you're in place, then how will human truck drivers compete with these automated alternatives? The current model is you turn the truck driver into a purser, and a ride-along that basically is handling the accounting going on in the truck. But IBM did a large-scale experiment. It wasn't really an experiment. It was a policy decision when they were doing layoffs and they got rid of printing, where they took all the guys that worked on the printing line. They didn't want to let them off. This was back when IBM was doing full employment or lifetime employment. And they took those printer guys, the engineers and the rest, and they turned them into accountants. And not only were the accountants really unhappy, but the accounting at IBM went to hell. We couldn't balance the books. So you can't take somebody that likes doing one thing and immediately flip them over to doing something completely different. An engineer is probably not going to make a great accountant, though you would think, because numbers involved, maybe they would be. But I've done parts of both jobs, and they are not remotely the same. So you could not pay me enough to be an accountant. So I can certainly understand what happened with the IBMers. So part of this retraining is going to have to be repurposing people that really don't like to do the work the way it's redefined through artificial intelligence, and finding a way to repurpose them, or we're going to have a large number of people that are unemployed and unemployable. And that's a societal problem that we're going to have to address. And it's not the first time. Industrial revolutions, every time we go through an industrial revolution, we change job dynamics. The last big industrial revolution effectively gave us labor unions, largely to the fact we started really mistreating workers, though I expect that had been going on for some time. This could do something very similar. We change the overall dynamic of politics. We change the overall dynamics of man and labor, of workers and labor, and really we should start simulating that now, because we need to have the way to mitigate some of the problems that will result before those problems result, because they'll be large scale and global in nature. So 5.0 is going to have Industry 5.0 is going to have a number of very positive impacts in terms of overall productivity and cost versus revenue performance results. But the big problem is going to be what we're going to do with labor, how we're going to repurpose labor, how we're going to retrain labor, and what labors and jobs, what types of jobs are going to be supplemented by AI, and what types of jobs are going to be replaced by AI. And if we don't know that before it happens, the surprise of that impact is going to be fairly significant and likely dire. And I'll pass the baton on.
Mr. Shackle, what you want to discuss about Industry 5.0?
Well, firstly, just to Rob's comments about truck drivers, I think remuneration is a big part of that. I mean, who wants to do that job with the pay that's being offered? Anthony made my head hurt a little bit with his comments. I was backstage doing a couple of other things. I have actually read a couple of his books, and I think he makes some very interesting points. Look, as the certified technophobe amongst us, I look at 5.0 as actually being a positive thing from what I understand about it from a rudimentary perspective. Look, I'm a trader at the core. I know I have a lot of other hats that I wear, but I'm a financial trader. And when we started looking at high-frequency trading and algorithmic trading, I just had such grave concerns. And look, algorithmic trading is not terrible, but sometimes you get results you're not expecting. And I've spent a lot of time talking to the programmers and the people that originally wrote the codes, and I will say to them, why did your code or your algorithm do this particular thing? And what ends up happening is the code starts generating itself. And so they don't know. When I ask them, they actually don't know why the code did that. And again, as a technophobe who doesn't really understand what's going on, I said, can't you create the code in such a way that when it makes changes, it can tell you why it did what it did? As in, I made the decision based on analysis of this set of data, and these were the parts of that data that I used to make this choice. One of the problems that we saw in the financial markets is a thing called curve fitting, where it would look through past data and it would act as though what happened in the past is likely to happen again in the future. And when it would see a similar type of financial setup as what it saw, similar market conditions as what it's seen in the past, it would try to trade the markets in a similar way. And that could sometimes be very profitable, but it could sometimes be absolutely disastrous. And you've actually seen some really big financial companies have incredible losses. And you saw the flash crash, for example, a number of years ago in the markets. It was caused by algorithms that went awry. I like the idea of an algorithm saying to me, this is what I've determined. This is what I think you should have a look at. I don't want it to make the final decision and pull the trigger itself. The problem, of course, with that is that slows us down. And if we're trying to compete with fully automated firms, we can't compete. The decision that I made within the finance companies that I'm involved in was that we shouldn't bother competing with the HFTs because there was just too much involved and I had to put too much trust into systems that I don't really know and understand. So I think that the human involvement is very important. Rob, you make a very good point about the truckers. Look, we saw that in the printing industry, and I know that people talk about the printing press. Before that, we had the scribes. And of course, when we went from handwritten documents to the printing press, for example, there was a lot of complaints about people being put out of work and the proliferation of information from unqualified people who would pollute the minds of our young, which is very similar to what we're hearing today with the internet, that all these things are polluting the minds of the young. I don't actually have too much of a concern there. I think that we're resilient as a species and we'll find productive things for people to do. But I think we have to be very careful about how much we give up. Now, I'm still in my 30s. I can remember it. I'm sure that you guys can even more remember when you were a kid. You could probably remember 20 or 30 phone numbers. You could remember your mum's phone number, your dad's work number, the school's phone number, your best friend's phone number, etc. You knew how to, ride your bike across town and get to your best friend's house and play whatever games you wanted to play with your best friends. A lot of what we've done is not actually the AI taking over. It's us giving it up. Most people today can't even give you 5 phone numbers because they're not used to doing it. Most people today would have absolutely no idea how to get from here to their friend's place unless they have a good memory. If you're like me, who's not very spatially aware, you need that Google Maps to take you there. And in the early days of GPS technology, I remember using it and it was taking me around in circles until I finally went, we've been here 4 times. I think we should just keep driving down this road and follow the sign. So I think the technology will improve, but I'm gravely concerned about the technology being used in such a way that we rely on it as if it is the truth. As if, hey, I'm single, I'd like to get a new partner, I'd like to get married. I'm going to use the AI to weed through all of the 3.5 billion females that live on this planet, and it's going to tell me what I should go for. It's probably going to give me a bad result. It's probably not really going to give me the best result that I can have, because what it's going to judge things on is not necessarily what human beings judge things on. Even though we articulate certain things, there's certain things that can't be articulated. So I think AI has its purposes. On a previous show on Pod TV with Mark Lee, we were talking about how the Chinese are using brainwave technology in schools to find out when a student is not paying attention and things like that. We should ask that question. Well, what are you going to do if the student's not paying attention? Are you going to zap them to make sure they're paying attention? It's natural for human minds to wander off. And it's also natural for human minds to perhaps have heard a concept and to be distracted while they're thinking about that concept, as opposed to paying attention to what's being said after that concept was introduced to them. I think AI can be a tool. I like the idea of human beings being involved back in that process. I think that's really important. But I don't think it's something that we should be scared of. Something that we should be wary of, but not scared of. And at that, I'll leave it at that. Mark.
Well, a couple of things that you were talking to Shaquille that were occurring to me and everything. Well, one is I had a friend and a coworker that actually used to work for eHarmony, and actually AI was used in a lot of that technology because he was actually doing a lot of that programming of your desires and your wants and everything in order to find you that partner and all along those lines. And I think that is the same technology that a lot of these other platforms use. If you want to look at Tinder or Bumble or a number of the other dating apps that are out there, that they oftentimes use that technology that you are talking about, and they will find your commonalities and try to find you that perfect mate and all along those lines. But I was very fascinated because the gentleman was actually out of California, moved to North Carolina, and was very much involved in the early days of this technology. So this technology has been around for a while, and he definitely showed me some of the things that they were doing in that space to try to make sure that they found you the correct partner as you decided to either swipe left or swipe right, or whichever other direction you wanted to swipe in those categories. But it was quite fascinating talking to Brian. That was the gentleman's name and everything, because he had come from that background and he had come from the tech background. So definitely came out of the tech industry and was very much involved in those early days of that particular site. And, it can even sometimes work. My brother actually found his significant other through eHarmony, and a lot of the family feels that this is the right one after a couple of failed attempts at marriage. So maybe the technology will work, and all along those lines, because it does seem like it is working in this particular case, as they have found some commonalities that they found through.
But they met, right? They met and interacted. I don't think
They did
I certainly wouldn't be prepared to allow a computer system to say to me, married at first sight, okay, you don't get to meet the chick, you're just going to get married to her. I don't trust the AI enough. And Anthony, I don't know if you heard what I said before, but I'm sure I've read one of your books. I saw your face before, and I was after you made my brain hurt. I was thinking, I'm sure I've read one of your books, and I think what part of it. There's a guy called Colt. I can't remember his first name. I'm sorry, it's been a while. Who woke up on a space flight or something, and
Lawrence Colt.
Lawrence Colt, that's him. So I don't remember Colt.
11th dimension.
That's it. That sounds about right.
Was it 5-star? Was it a 5-star review?
I'm not sure if I even left a review, my friend. I think actually it was a book given to me as a gift because I don't normally read sci-fi, and somebody said you should read this. So
that was my first book. That's my first book.
Well, the first book, wow,
2006.
2006. Well, Shaquille, along those same lines, well, the other thing that I found interesting, and you mentioned Pod TV earlier, was a person that used to come on that show regularly, but has been busy with his own company. That being David Grasso, wrote a poll, because a lot of times people are finding information through LinkedIn and everything, and it was this notion, and it comes back to our thoughts around Industry 5.0. But a lot of people were really enjoying leisure, and they were enjoying working from home. And I was just talking to a friend of mine that was saying that in some of the companies that he is working at, they may be at 60 to 70% occupancy, but the other 30 to 40% are resisting the urge to come back to the office. And some people will say that the office is kind of what you were talking about, Shaquille, that need for humans to interact with each other and all along those lines. But there are some folks that are like, no, I'm perfectly fine working from my home and maneuvering from my home and just dealing with the immediate circle of friends and family and all in that space. And that has been something that we are seeing even at this day and time. Like I said, that's two examples. And all along those lines, I know that Measurement, one of the companies I work for, is pretty much been remote for the last 2 or 3 years. And I don't think that any of the workers will be rushing to get home, even though we are grading test papers. And there's maybe some people that want the human interaction, but are lacking that human interaction. But a lot of folks are vastly fighting that and are glad to stay at home. I think that some of the corporations are having a hard time getting their people to come back to the office.
Well, it's interesting that Zoom, the company that sort of helped everybody to outsource and work from home, is actually asking for its employees to come back to the office. I'll just come back to human interaction for a moment, just in my own lane in finance. So somebody who's very close to me is a professor of maths and statistics. And I rang him one day and I said, look, I've been working on this data and I just cannot get it to give me the results that I want, right? Like I can't get the calculations to work. And he said to me, well, send me the data and tell me what you're trying to do. And I said, look, I'm in Excel and I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. And he goes, oh, why would you use Excel? You should use something else. I said, well, I barely know how to use Excel. I don't want to learn some other code. He said, you should use R. I said, what's R? And I'm sure the more technological savvy people amongst us are probably going to laugh at me now. But I've sent him the data and I jumped on a Zoom conference with him. And I'm like, so this is what I'm trying to do in Excel. And by the time I'd finished the first command, he said, the answer you want is this. I said, how do you know the answer is that? He goes, I read it through R. Now, what's very interesting, though, is that the more technical the field, the more gotchas that are in the field, the more that things get missed. So actuaries, for example, generally work for insurance companies, but they can also work for companies like mine that trade the markets. You have to be very specific with what you're asking them to do. So when we were manipulating the data, the individual who was providing with those results said to me, the data suggests that you should do this. And I was horrified because I said, absolutely not. That's the worst possible type of trade setup that we could possibly get involved in. Now, I understand why he got that answer. And the answer he got was correct on the maths and on the data, but it just wasn't correct in the real world. And I think that this is one of the issues that AI is going to have, because I think that no matter how advanced it gets, there's just going to be certain things that in the real world applications are not going to work just based on data inputs or data mining inputs. So that's where I have some concern about the over-reliance. I don't think anybody cares when they jump onto Netflix and a movie or a show is recommended to them that they're not going to like, or Amazon recommends a book that they're not going to like. But when a trade is being done by a financial company for hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars, and it's an incorrect trade and there's been no human intervention, that has real world impacts. We've been able to use AI in the healthcare sector, and we've had some fantastic results. But if we rely on it too much, it can then give us results which are not very good. And for example, I saw a talk fairly recently. I'm a smoker, for those of you that aren't, I'm sorry, but I actually still smoke cigarettes, unfortunately. And one of the things that people often say is if you use patches and gum and nicotine replacement, that you double your chances of quitting. What they don't tell you is that the chances of actually quitting cold turkey is something like 1%, and the chances of quitting using the patches is like 2%. So yeah, you've doubled your chances, but it doesn't really make much of a difference. However, AI used in healthcare in certain situations has actually produced a very interesting result. It has recommended some people start smoking because the damage being caused offsets other things in healthcare. Now, we all know that you would never recommend that. Okay, no rational doctor would ever say to their patient, what I think you should do is to smoke a pack a day. But that's the sort of results that you'll get with AI. And if you don't know how it got to the result and you're not a specialist in the field, so it's not obvious to you, you actually may miss some of those nuances. So I think that the more that we can have humans interact with the AI and with the robots, I think the better. Again, I'm a technophobe, so I'm slightly out of my lane.
But Shaquille, along those same lines, if you follow, and particularly here in the West, I don't know if they do it in Australia, but here in the United States, if you watch any station that is among the big stations in your local area, they will talk to centurions, people that have made it to 100 or 105, 110, whatever that age is, and all along those lines. And usually they have done exactly what you just said. So that is probably where the AI is getting some of its data from, because a lot of times they are doing everything that we are not supposed to do in order to live that long. They will often tell you that they have drunk a fifth of liquor, they have smoked a pack a day, they have been chasing all kinds of women and doing all kinds of other things that are sort of things that society tells us is not how to get to 100. As a matter of fact, they have oftentimes not even exercised on a regular basis, and in some cases are being very much sloths, if I can use that term, and all along those lines. But hey, they made it to 105, 110, and I'm sure that Rob has seen that in his part of the world, just like I'm sure that other parts have seen it in their parts of the world as well. Am I not right, Rob?
Let's hear from Rob. I'll just say to you that, again, if you find a person who's 110 who's been smoking since they were 15, that's not necessarily a recommendation for you to start smoking. But unfortunately, if the AI is limited to just that data set,
right,
then the AI is going to recommend that you do exactly that. That's the problem with AI without any human intervention. But Rob, I'd love to hear your comments on the things I've said. As I said, I'm slightly out of my lane with IT.
Well, so the nature of AI, it really comes down to the training set, and we certainly saw that early on with facial recognition. The training set was created with guys my age, mostly my age, white, and as soon as we went to people of color, particularly women of color, the crossover between women of color and apes was almost 100%. And so you were getting women of color being identified as female gorillas and orangutans. And there was a certain amount of blowback as a result of that, rather significant. In fact, so significant that a number of companies immediately exited that particular aspect of AI because that did so much brand damage. That's true of any any training set. If the training set is not comprehensive, then the answers it's going to give are going to be based on that training set, and it's going to err where that training set failed. So using that initial example, the training set, the recognition for white older guys was almost perfect, in the high 90 percentile. The recognition for female women, black women, was something in the 10 to 15% range, and that just showcased that they didn't have enough black women in the training set, and of course it kind of showcased the difficulties. We didn't have a ton of black people in the entire field, and people were using the scientists as the basis for the training. And more weird stuff happened subsequent to that. We had a bunch of politicians suddenly pop up and being identified as homicidal maniacs and criminals, which didn't exactly endear them to the particular technology either. But again, it just showcases the training set. Now, as we've moved to these latest generational AI models, where the training sets in the petabyte range, they're very comprehensive. So now the problem we've got with AI training is the intentional or unintentional introduction of bias, where people are going in and intentionally trying to break the AI for a variety of reasons. So some just because they think it's fun, others because they're concerned about their jobs. But maintaining the integrity of these training sets has become a major focus now of AI. And one of the interesting pivots that just happened is something called Agile AI, which is where instead of using these massive petabyte training sets, which cost about $100 million to create, so very prohibitive in terms of how you might use them, they create smaller training sets, but in more focused areas. So the AI may not be able to do everything for everyone, but it might be able to handle the delineation between picking between a screw and a nut on an assembly line. And those training sets only cost $200,000 to create. And they're very focused, but you have to make sure they stay in their lane, because if you use one of these Agile AI platforms to do something that needs to be done by one of these large language models, it's going to fail. It just simply doesn't have adequate training. And we've got parallels with people, because if you take somebody that say is say a master jeweler, and you take them against an apprentice jeweler, and you're cutting a $40 million diamond, that apprentice jeweler is probably going to screw the damn thing up, and you're going to want the master to do it because their experience level is higher. And so the same thing that I think we're going to find with AI is applying the appropriate AI, a level of AI to the problem. If you underapply or overapply, you're going to have issues. Overapply means you're spending way too much money for the solution, and underapply means that the AI will not be able to fundamentally do the job, and it will probably fail. And remember, with AI, you've got one really big problem that we have discussed, and that's that it operates at machine speed. And if you've got an AI making mistakes, it's making mistakes far faster than a human can correct them. So the difficulty we're finding in trying to integrate a person with AI as a quality control is the person simply can't act fast enough. By the time the person engages, the AI may have done catastrophic damage, and a number of the scenarios that show a dire outcome to AI implementation has less to do with Terminator types of concepts, where the AI turns hostile and decides that people are the thing that needs to be corrected, and you correct them by killing them. It's more the case the AI just goes out of control and consumes an entire critical resource. You've got an AI that's building itself out at scale, it's consuming oxygen in an area, you now get oxygen depletion, and suddenly a bunch of people are dying because there's enough oxygen out there. And if you're talking about a self-training AI that's building out its own plant, that becomes not a near-term possibility, but an eventual possibility, and it certainly could be a huge problem in a contained environment. Say if you're building a moon base or a Mars base where your resources are very limited, and the AI would have total control. A simple programming error could create a massive problem that a human would be quick enough to correct. We had an example of that, I believe it was in Florida, where a hacker came in and was able to alter the amount of chlorine on a computer-generated algorithm that placed chlorine in the water, and altered the algorithm. So instead of placing the right amount of chlorine, it was something like 10,000x, which would have turned the drinking water, into something that was toxic and would kill a lot of people. Now, in that case, it got caught because the problem was created by a human, and human caught the problem. But now, we put in place something where an AI has made that decision, and there'd be a good chance that chlorine would be dumped in the water long before a human. I mean, your first indication would be people dropping dead. And so, the current thought is your protective mechanism against AI has to be another AI, much like you would have in a situation where you've got where you have, say, police, and you have other policemen that are trained in it as internal affairs that are keeping track of the policemen. That you need something that's trained to understand the problem, but can operate as quickly as the machines that are causing the problem can create. So what probably my internal affairs example, given a lot of problems we're having with police isn't perfect. The thing is AIs, monitoring AIs may be the best path to assuring that the AI does not make these decisions in mass and carry it forward. Now, back to the question on in terms of medical advice. The irony here is one of the best examples I had of AI application was IBM Watson and medical advice. And the example was one of the training physicians had a problem with a woman that come in and that was sick, and she was sick for years, and nobody could figure out what was wrong with her. And he made it his personal mission to figure out what was wrong with her. It took him 2 years to finally figure out that she had some weird disease that could be mitigated. And so as a test, they took her symptoms and threw it into Watson. Watson created a list, and the seventh item on the list was what she had. And so with that list, if they would have been able to determine by eliminating the other 6 items what she had within about 3 hours, as opposed to 2 years. And so a huge difference, but showcasing that it did require a doctor to make the final decision because the AI determined there was a number. I think it listed 200 possibilities, but it was this number 7 top. And this was early on, so it probably would have been more accurate now. But it did require a doctor to step in and some physical testing to drive through to the final solution, which is kind of where we are now. I'm not sure any of us would rely on an AI to give us a diagnosis and expect it to execute without a doctor in the mix. However, advance 10 years, and there's no doubt in my mind that the AI would be capable of doing this without the doctor. Then the question comes: is, are we going to trust it? And that trust thing may take us a couple decades. There may be one of the interesting dynamics. We may have AIs that can do a lot of the stuff long before we will trust those AIs to do a lot of that stuff. And God save us if we put AIs in control of weapon systems before they're ready. But that's a whole different discussion. I'll pass back.
Hey, Rob, just really quickly, a couple of things crossed my mind as you were saying that, and all that you were saying was very pertinent and very relevant and everything. But one of the companies that I work for is Measurement Incorporated. Like I mentioned, it is a testing company and all along those lines. And the reason that we still have a job is because of what you just said. They feel that the humans need to test against the AI because the AI may be accurate in some senses, but it doesn't always understand nuances and the different aspects.
Critical right now.
Society.
It's absolutely critical because we really can't. AIs are not yet infallible, far from it, and so you do need to consistently test and consistently validate. And it's really important. Back to the earlier comment that the AI that you're using have an audit trail and be transparent. You do not want a black box. You need to understand why it made the decision it made, so you can determine whether that decision is correct. And if it makes a wrong decision, you need that to be able to mitigate the damage and make sure it doesn't continue to make mistakes. Because an AI, if it's not corrected and it's making a mistake, it's a system. It'll continue to make that mistake. So if you're not aware it's making a mistake, it's going to be problematic. And if you don't correct the mistake timely, it's going to be problematic. So it's nature where we are today.
Just to Shaquille's point, and Shaquille, you're on mute and everything, and then I'm definitely going to turn it over to you, is that one of the complaints that the people have, and Shaquille will get a big kick out of this, with myself at that particular company, is that I am fairly accurate and also fairly fast. So there are some people at that particular company that get frustrated because they say that I may be matching the AI in speed, maybe not as quite as much speed as the AI has, but that is one of the complaints that the folks at Measurement will have, because they'll be like, Mark, you're working this out of a job, you're working a little bit too fast, and all along those lines. So maybe I'm a robot in another life, Shaquille. I don't know, but I have to find out and let you know, or something along those lines.
I think one of the issues, Rob, of course, we need to find out what's actually happening. And one of the things that we've seen in the trading, in the world of microfinance and micro market dynamics.
Well, which has been an area that has been incredibly aggressive with regard to implementing technology. Trades are now made in microseconds, and certainly, as we've seen in the past, when it gets out of hand, it can be problematic.
Well, that's right. And one of the things that we've actually seen is people being able to reverse engineer what the algorithms are and then create trades because the markets are not always that active. So when the markets are not very active and there's low volume, you can actually deliberately print certain things. And a lot of these companies can actually trade against themselves. So you can buy and sell and cross your own trade. And so it can actually give the AI or the algorithms, more rudimentary, we're talking 10 years ago, it can actually give the algorithms false information, and then the algorithms act a certain way. And if you know how the algorithms are going to act, then you can trade against those positions. So, yeah, I do think it's really important to say, but the comment that you've made about having AI to monitor AI, I think the complaint, to use your analogy, the complaint about the police monitoring the police is that they have a vested interest and they're going to overlook certain things. I think it's the same thing with AI. If AI is monitoring other AI, then you are relying on the AI, internal affairs AI, to tell you when there's a problem. And if you're not actually able to see,
not tell you, it's got to act. And the thing is the point. The point is humans can't act fast enough, and so it's not even telling you anymore. It's the monitoring AI would immediately identify the problem and then shut off the AI that is misbehaving.
And that's what I'd want to see. I'd want to see other algorithms or other AI shut things down and tell me there's a problem. I wouldn't want them to try to correct the problem themselves. But again, it depends on the application. So in my world, we're talking about trading the markets. If you're talking about launching a satellite or a spaceship or, non-person driven vehicles and people talk about perhaps air travel, instead of having pilots, because there's a shortage of pilots as well, we can have that done by AI and computers, air traffic control, all those sorts of things. Yeah, I have some issues there. And can you just shut something off? If a plane is descending, can you just shut it off? Or what if you do shut it off, then what? So I think this.
Well, then you'd have a person step in.
Yeah, I'd love to get Anthony. He's got a thought around this, because one thing that I have seen in the science fiction space, and I'm definitely a fan of science fiction, whether it's Black Mirror or a number of others, and I know Anthony has written some books along those lines, is the notion of the fact of, if AI feels threatened by the humans, does it eliminate the humans? Because there have been a number of Black Mirror and other episodes of various science fiction.
That's the entire plot of Terminator.
Yeah, it's basically the plot of Terminator, but it's the plot of a lot of other science fiction where AI is feeling threatened and AI is like, hey, well, those humans are the problem. Let's go ahead and just eliminate them. Anthony, you're in that science fiction space as well as books in general. So is this something we need to be worried about? I don't compare
my works to Black Mirror, I have to be honest. I think my work's a bit deeper than that, but anyway.
You've made my brain hurt, my friend.
I'm sorry?
I said you've made my brain hurt, my friend.
Well, I mean, my last book, Under a Martian Sky, I recommend that. That's just come out. It's a novella, Under a Martian Sky. But I started off talking about space exploration and galaxy and modeling, AI based on algorithms that can find and categorize and identify patterns in star and galaxy data. Means that astronomers can map the universe with unprecedented clarity. So I was talking a little bit about that. Image processing, AI algorithms are used to interpret and analyze images taken by satellite and so forth. So I was talking a bit about space exploration. But given that you, Mark, have mentioned the whole notion of science fiction, I do speak a lot about mind control, as Rob knows. I talk about nanochips being implanted into the brain that have the capacity to extract all encephalic data, register all encephalic data into these nanochips, and via special signals, collect the information and download it into a government computer for government consumption. So mind control. So basically, as I've mentioned before, many times before, hacking into the brain requires decoding the logic of neurons. Is there any science that we can add to this? Is this something that could actually happen within science, to actually hack into the brain of a human being? Well, thoughts are energy signals. It's important to note. Thoughts are energy signals. Thus, the energy transmitting a thought therefore has mass. The ions and molecules encoding the energetic signal have mass too. Since thoughts are physical and have spatial dimensions, it could be possible to actually lock into people's brains. Neuronal activity and scanning brainwave pattern. So science fiction, but science fact, if you see what I'm saying.
Can I ask you two questions very quickly? People love to talk about immortality. One, do you think that it's possible, at least in the science fiction world, there's been movies and books about this before, of being able to replicate a person's personality and thoughts and memories and implant them into a new body? Is that something that's potentially possible?
Well,
and second, how would you use this technology that you referred to in relation to something that people talked about a lot, meteor mining, to be able to bring back resources, gold and platinum and all these other resources that we need from meteors that have a much higher density than what we have here on Earth?
Well, cybernetic immortality, digital immortality, virtual immortality. I spoke about this before with Rob a few months ago. And basically, once you die, a digital version of yourself can live forever. Digital brain uploading, transferring one's consciousness into a computer, into a robot, and so forth. So a person's life data means a version of you could live forever, which leads to brain uploading, creation of digital avatars by an AI application that analyzes personal data and, of course, correspondence. So for me personally, this is philosophically impossible because you would have to scan the brain. Now, the brain is you'd have to have an exact copy of the brain. The brain is far too complex. It's like 100 computers working together symbiotically. How do you scan the brain? Now, the mind is separate to the brain. How can you get a copy of the mind? It's far too complex. So for me, I think it's philosophically impossible.
And in relation to meteor mining?
The nature of consciousness, consciousness is the continual creation of models, feedback loops, which describe a model of our place in space and time. For me, consciousness is interconnected to a spiritual realm. I'm very much into philosophy and theology, if you like. So to me, the nature of consciousness, the nature of man is far deeper than something digital. So for me, digital immortality doesn't work philosophically. I know that Rob sees it differently.
And in relation to space exploration, what's your thoughts and feelings on using AI to mine meteors for their mineral resources?
Oh, we're already planning to do that. Anthony, I think your question was to you.
It was sad. We've lost him. Okay,
we lost him.
Over to you.
So going back to Anthony's question on the uploading the mind. The issue is, and there's some interesting breakthroughs that have recently happened. They've been able to take MRI scans and develop a language model that can then read the person's mind they took the scan from. But what they've discovered is once you develop that model, it doesn't work on everybody. It only works on the person that you develop the scan with. So you can program the model on the individual, and then based on what you see going on in the brain, you can make a determination with reasonably high accuracy about what it is they're thinking. But you have to train the model on the individual first. And that means it's kind of weird. We're all thinking differently. Because it's when we talk about telepathy, probably why telepathy doesn't work is because each one of us has evidently developed a way of interacting with the world that is unique to us, and that makes it really hard to scale something like this out. But they have figured out how to work on an individual, and if you had such a scan and you'd already gone through the training, and then you had an accident where you lost the ability to speak, it's very likely that the AI could come in and create a bridge and allow you to speak again through the computer. The problem is that you may not be able to train after the fact, because they've got to train the AI, and if you can't speak, then how are you able to tell the AI what it is you're doing if you're quadriplegic and you lost the ability to speak? So there's some thresholds we have to cross to actually let it do what it could do, but it does show proof of concept that we can make a connection between an MRI and what you're thinking, which does at least show promise in terms of the ability to create a much tighter man-machine interface. You think about it using a better interface for fighter pilots, for instance, or somebody that's operating weapons, where you have to think very quickly, and the delay between your brain and your hands could be the difference between whether you live or die. Could be fascinating. And I have little doubt the Department of Defense is already all over. They have been for quite some time. Now, as far as uploading, the question is will it matter whether you can upload the mind or brain or not? If we can emulate the individual with a high degree of accuracy, in other words, if I could emulate you to both visibly create your image and based on how you've publicly operated in the past, create something that would act the very same way you have historically acted, enough so that a third party could not tell the difference, is that good enough? If you're creating for instance, if you're a parent, you're terminally ill, you've got a child, you want to be there for your child when your child, I'm going to tear up if I say this, when your child is going to college or has any difficulty, you could create an AI of yourself that could perform that particular role. And from the child's perspective, it would be you. It would be you frozen as you were at that time. So it wouldn't be the you that might have existed at the time they graduated college, but to your child, it may not make a difference. And in some ways, it might be better because they're now speaking to you as you were when you were their age, and you might be able to level with them better than you would be able to level with them if you were in your 50s and they're in their 20s, where you get that great generational gap, and they don't want to listen to you, and you're not really understanding them. If they're talking to you in the same age range they are, there might be a better conversation to be had, and that might be, from your perspective, to be good enough. The other thing we have to address, when we're uploading somebody into the computer, is the fact that we're not the same person we were when we were in our teens, preteens, teens, 20s and 30s. We replace at a cellular level. We are replaced every 10 years, and we're different. And I know full well that I'm a very different person than I was when I was in my teens. I don't think I even like myself the way I was in my teens. Certainly have none of the same hobbies, almost none of the same interests, and my priorities are different. So if you were to hold me up against where I was in my teens, I think you would argue I'm a fundamentally different person from the perspective of an external observer, and yet as we look at something like digital immortality, without that cellular replacement, which you could program in, but why? You would no longer be the transitioning human you were. You'd be a frozen human the way that you always were at whatever age you made that particular training transition. And so not only is it not clear we are even a continuous element, we're simply dying on a regular basis, and we fool ourselves to thinking it's some type of continuity, and it may not. We're just different people at different times, and we just have this false sense that it's continuous, which means uploading is as big a problem as we thought, because it's just one more thing, and then we stay static. And so that creates a number of interesting dynamics. One, a near-term way to solve the problems we might want to solve with digital immortality, except for the fact it's not us. But then it may not be us now that we were last week. So the problem we're trying to solve may be unsolvable because it's simply the way we are that makes it unsolvable. So it's a fascinating. Digital immortality is a fascinating subject.
For me, because I'm coming from a theological, philosophical angle, if you like, it changes everything. A lot of transhumanists are atheists, and so everything is pictured very materialistically in that sense.
Sure.
But for me, the nature of man, the soul, goes far deeper. As I said, consciousness is the continual creation of models, feedback loops, which describe a model of our place in space and time. Space and time is an electromagnetic field, 0-point electromagnetic quanta. It's an electromagnetic field. We're bound by time and space. Man is essentially body, soul, and spirit. The biological side, the spiritual side, and the soul, which is a nexus of electromagnetic forces, which cannot be destroyed. Our soul is a nexus of electromagnetic forces which cannot be destroyed. So to me, this whole notion of digital immortality, virtual immortality being the operative word, for me personally doesn't work. As I said, in order to create a virtual you would need to have an exact copy of one's brain. Given that the brain is so complex, so much electrical and chemical activity within the brain, it's like hundreds of computers working together symbiotically.
But if I can stop you for a second, if I could create something that could convince a third party it was you, from the third party's perspective, from your perspective, there would be a difference, but from the third party's perspective, there wouldn't be any difference, and that digital representation of you would last as long as the platform it was hosted on.
But virtual, it would remain, because beyond this three-dimensional space, we're all subjected to entropy. Entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, the immutable metaphysical law of the universe. Everything over time decays and eventually is destroyed, and so forth. So in terms from that perspective, I believe ultimately entropy takes place. We decay and die.
The platform you're on is eventually going to, the planet you're on is going to evaporate.
But the soul, which is a nexus of electromagnetic forces, once the body succumbs to entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, the immutable metaphysical law of the universe, the soul then transcends time and space and enters into a new dimension. So we are immortal from
that part of us
a
is
spiritual perspective. This is the way
but you've lost your biology. You've lost all your memories. You've lost all that stuff that people would identify you as you.
Hang on a sec. I believe the brain and the mind are separate. So the mind is operating through the brain. So I believe that at death, the body ceases to be, the brain decays, but the mind is separate to the brain and it disengages. So it retains memory, thoughts, and identity, which is what makes us what we are. And that then transcends into another dimension beyond this three-dimensional space, into eternality, into an eternal realm.
A lot of people believe that the difficulty is we actually know how memories are stored, and there is no transitional process that takes the memory someplace else.
Absolutely.
What?
As I was saying very quickly, for me, the brain is far too complex. Whatever you would create would be a virtual you, wouldn't be you. The real you is the soul.
But I'm not sure it would make a difference. The thing is, it'd be a virtual you, but from a third party's perspective, I don't think it would make a difference. From your perspective, it might, but it may not make a difference to the virtual you. The virtual you that was created may think it's just as much you as you think you're you. And there lies the difficulty. There have been a number of science fiction writers that have explored this one.
I think what's the defining factor here is when you enter into that theological domain, you're looking at it purely from a carnal perspective. So for me, whatever you would create would remain virtual, but the real essence of who we are is connected to the source, which transcends anything within this world. It transcends time and space and transcends anything that we could create and replicate through artificial intelligence. And that's the fundamental key for me. So you could create a virtual you, yes, but it would remain nothing but virtual. Doesn't matter how one would perceive it, but fundamentally speaking.
Well, now when you say remain virtual, there's certainly possible that you could take that virtual you and create an android you that could walk in the real space. And you could create a clone, and you could create a clone and program the clone with the knowledge that the AI had.
But again, it's virtual. The essence of the soul transcends anything materialistic.
But I wonder if you could tell the difference. I mean, the question
connected to the source.
The question is, could anybody tell the difference? I mean, everything you just said is certainly very possible, but the issue we've got is we've never been able to measure the soul. So that means, how would you? I mean, if somebody walked up to you tomorrow that didn't have a soul, how would you tell?
Irrespective of how convincing this thing would be, in quotes, this virtual you, it's still virtual. The real you is connected to the source, which transcends time and space.
Well, I think the real question there would be
fundamental virtual. As I said, the brain is far too complex to get an identical copy. The mind, which is separate to the brain, which you can't even see, at least the brain is tangible, is the essence of who we truly are that operates through the brain. How are you going to get an exact copy of the mind? How are you going to get an exact copy of the brain?
Well, in theory, we can do biological printing. So all we would need is to be able to do the scan deep enough.
Yeah, I think
I think the more interesting question would be not whether a third party thinks that the virtual you is you. The real question would be, how much consciousness does the virtual you have? Does the virtual you think that the virtual you is you?
That's the question.
A very interesting question.
We've seen some of the generative AI models start to act like they're aware that they are aware. That's why the researcher in Google went off the rails and started talking about the AI Google being aware and starting to designate rights, which got him fired. We're not there yet, but the underlying belief is, we'll be able to create AIs that are aware.
Do we want to let our other guests?
I wrote a book, Androids and the Gods.
Do you have any comments that you wanted to make?
I wrote a book, Do Androids Dream of the Gods? Androids and the Gods. This is all about artificial intelligence developing a sense of God. And this is, I think, book 6, Androids and the Gods. Do Androids Dream of the Gods? Now, if a machine can develop a sense of God, metaphysics needs to be redefined. Philosophy needs to be redefined. The nature of the mind and so forth. What are we? What does it mean to be human? It's a very powerful book, and I recommend that. But going back to did you read that, by the way, Rob?
I haven't yet. No, I'll have to do that. Sorry. I've gotten so hooked on lit RPG books that that I've been going back to back on those of late, but I'll have to pick that up and read it.
Hey, Rob, and I think just really quickly,
Androids and the Gods. Do Androids Dream of the Gods? That's a very powerful book. How a machine can develop a sense of God, and if a machine can develop a sense of God, then it we need a new metaphysics, a new philosophy to describe the nature of man, the soul, the mind, and so forth. What are we? What is it to be human? But just to close, as I said, as far as I'm concerned, the defining thing here is theology. For me, the nature of consciousness, man, and so forth is interconnected to the source, which transcends anything that we could do digitally. And I think that's the defining point.
And so we need to get to leave because we're overtime now. And
we're overtime. We're actually waiting for Sharif to come back because he's the one that actually controls all of this and all along those lines. And so hopefully he's listening to us and will come on and interrupt and definitely end the show because he's the only one that apparently can do that. But Talib, while we're waiting, did you have any thoughts? Because I know you've been listening and I had not heard from you. And I think that's where Shaquille was going, was we not heard any feedback from you as well. So if you have any feedback, I'm sure folks would love to hear.
Thank you, Mark. I'm enjoying this conversation very much. But I have a feeling that you're all against AI. I mean, there is a feeling of negativeness.
Not at all. I mean, in my initial statement and my initial presentation, I was talking about space exploration and talking about how AI has assisted in that in a tremendous way, as it has in every field of endeavor, whether it be the medical sphere or space exploration and so forth. It's just things like digital immortality. For me, as a philosopher and a theist, for me, it fails. And it's as simple as that.
So my perspective is it's like atomic energy. It's neither good nor bad. It just depends on how it's going to be used. AI could be a huge boon to help people move into the next generation. It could save the race. It could also destroy it. And so it's a tool, and it just depends on whether we're going to use the tool properly and ethically. And it's important that our industry really embraces the ethics of the creation of this tool, and it does for the most part, and assured that the tool is used properly. But governments aren't always on that same ethical page, and there's certainly a high probability that we're going to have some AI weapon systems that we're going to regret after the fact, much like we did with atomic energy.
That's what
That's the nature. But I'm not against AI. I'm just against the misuse of it.
Absolutely, I agree. Like as I've mentioned, I mean, for me as well, the fusion of brain and AI nanotechnology, AI human brain internet interface, connecting connecting neurons and synapses in the brain to the vast internet, computing networks in real time. So nanobots are injected into the vascular system. They make their way into the brain and embed themselves within individual neurons. And through nanorobotic fiber optics, you basically have this connection between brain and machine. And for me, the two systems merge. What do you have? You have a form of a new entity, if you like. We're no longer human. So these are some of the things that I would object to, personally speaking. The whole notion of this AI and brain interface. And once in position, these nanobots, as I said, they are induced to wirelessly supply synaptically processed and encoded human brain electrical information via auxiliary nanorobotic fiber optics. So it just basically, it gives man instant access to information, data. So we become like walking computers, essentially. The problem for me is moral and metaphysical, merging the human system with an external system. You have a new entity. Two systems merging, and could the brain handle this sudden input of information, a brain overload? And for me, you would be no longer human as two systems merge, system A and system B. So these are some of the things that I have problems with personally, as well as digital immortality. As I said, virtual it remains because we are connected to God, the eternal source. So these are my points. I merge philosophy, science, AI, and theology. But I'm a very strong theist. So a lot of my fundamental belief dynamics always connects to the source, whether it be physics, philosophy, AI. It's always connected to the source fundamentally, who is the giver of all life and set life into motion. So for me, as I said, I'll close with this again. I know Rob loves to argue this, but for me, going back to cybernetic immortality, for me, it's a virtual you. It's not the real you. The real you is connected to the source, which transcends time and space, this electromagnetic field. So anyway.
Hey,
I'm an encyclopedia. There you go.
Yeah, definitely want to hear from Talib as well and everything. But the one question I have for you, Anthony, and Talib is, what are your thoughts around the metaverse? Because a lot of people are very much interested in the metaverse, and it is tied into AI,
Sorry,
and in a
it's
lot of ways,
starting to
people are
break up
thinking
again.
that
I'm sorry.
as
Hang on.
an alternative universe.
Sorry, you're breaking up again.
Yeah, we
Maybe
don't
your
hear
end, because
you.
it came in clear through me. Clear to me. He's asking. Mark was asking about the metaverse.
Yes, what about the metaverse?
Mark, what was your question on the metaverse?
What's the
Yeah, I was just
question?
asking, is that tied into the AI conversation as well? Because I know some people,
Oh yeah.
you hear what
Oh,
Anthony just said about the whole notion of there being a not a reality and all in all those lines, particularly if we take it from a theological or philosophical standpoint. But I know a number of
well,
people that are in AI and they love going off into other parts of the world that are not real, but as far as they're concerned, they are real. You get create your own universe in some senses. So in
So
some
I'm just
ways,
about
SIGGRAPH is this
hearing
week.
virtual
even
again. Yes,
playing with God
virtual.
in
So
some ways.
you're
But
breaking up a
if
little
you can
bit,
translate that, Rob.
but it remains virtual nonetheless.
Well, so SIGGRAPH, we're talking about AI in the metaverse. SIGGRAPH is this week, and much of the content is blending AI into the metaverse, and mostly it's to create large scale, accurate simulations of environments so you can do modeling. And part of that modeling, of course, are digital twins of humans, but still pretty generic in terms of their behavior. But it's to make the model work. But it's fascinating because you can create, and Earth 2 is an example of that. That's the large scale metaverse model of the planet that's to be used for weather modeling, and we've got a similar model being created for the galaxy. I think it's being run out of Lawrence Livermore at the moment, and mostly just to see what's going out there and do virtual space exploration, which tends to be a ton cheaper, regardless of the hardware, than physical space exploration. But the blending of AI and the metaverse is part and parcel. Everything that you're going to see as the metaverse expands is going to have a certain amount of AI into it, because you've got to create emulations of the environment, of weather patterns, of the people that occupy it, of the vehicles that drive through it. Depending on how advanced the model is, the AI usage is pretty heavy. In fact, virtually all of the autonomous cars now are being trained in the metaverse. They can go through decades of training in a matter of hours, and it makes a huge difference in terms of the ability to identify and address problems real time and get to their goal, which is to basically eliminate all accidents caused by human error, and that's the majority of them. So they still can't eliminate accidents caused by physics, but you can eliminate the ones caused by human error. And by physics, I mean if you had a nice patch, you're out of control regardless.
Mark,
yeah, Rob, along
Mark,
the same lines and everything, and this is actually, I guess Anthony can answer this as well,
Sure.
is what is to stop somebody from creating? I mean, most of us are very much, I won't say most, but a lot of people are very much satisfied with their life here on the planet and are kind of scared of what the future may be if they're thinking about heaven or hell or a number of those other kind of constraints from a religious and philosophical standpoint. So if you have that fear or you have those thoughts, what is to stop those that are into AI and the metaverse from basically creating their own version of heaven on earth and everything? Because I don't see why you can create a metaverse that was literally your version of heaven. So like I said,
technology limitations is all that. We saw that with the Facebook meta implementation. The technology limitations are the only prevention. If you want to drop somebody into that virtual heaven, we've got to do a better job with man-machine interfaces, using Anthony's idea of creating a much stronger or more pervasive connection between your mind and the metaverse, so it feels like you're there. Right now, we're not quite, even with immersion tanks, we're not really able to place you in the environment as you would. So we haven't bridged that brain-machine interface. Though, as I mentioned earlier, I think Anthony was off, but the recent works with the MRI brain mapping have indicated we are close. We can now determine with MRIs what a person is thinking, but the model has to be trained on that person. So the cost of putting you in that environment could be extreme. A billionaire could afford it. You and I, near term, cannot. And even with the billionaires, we're probably a decade out. But we have a path now, and so you could put somebody into that artificial reality. The book something the androids dream of robotic sheep. his wife was locked in was in an immersion tank and was in that virtual heaven and didn't want to leave, which is we already have that kind of problem with people over gaming. But if you created some of these environments, it's very likely people would go into the environment and would never want to leave.
Still waiting for Sharif and everything. Talib, I'm going to turn it over to you if you got some thoughts. We've been dominating the conversation, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and everything as to where you are on AI and everything.
Thank you so much, Mark Lee. Okay, now where I am in IA is very primitive still. We're still in the developing world. We are still finding our way through AI and the metaverse, but AI is more important now to us. The AI is still very unknown to us, but what we are worried about here in the third world, in the developing world, is the use of this AI in military purposes, because that's going to forever change the course of things, because you know how things are, and we are very worried about this. But otherwise, AI is welcomed here. I think AI has become an issue that is debated here amongst the intellectuals, and I can sympathize with Anthony's theological discourse here. Very much.
There's not many of those.
No. I really say that. I say that truly. Now, that's what I want to say.
By the way, I'm not religious per se. I don't follow any religion. I'm a theistic evolutionist. Just thought I'd mention that. So the notion of heaven and hell, and so forth. I mean, I'm a theistic evolutionist. In a sense, a deist. I'm a theistic evolutionist. God-driven evolution. Okay?
Good.
So I don't fall into any category of religion per se. I'm a theistic evolutionist.
Well, I'm a Muslim. Theology, I'm a Muslim.
Not attached to any religion. Okay.
I'm a Muslim myself.
I'm familiar with Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, al-Tabari, the Hadith.
Yeah.
I've done a bit of research in my journey. So.
That's good. That's good to know. Okay. That's what I wanted to say, Mark Lee. Mark, I'm saying that artificial intelligence is very dangerous when it's used for military purposes, especially by some leaders. Some particular leaders. We're worried about that in our world.
Yeah.
But other than that, we're not worried about it. We are approaching it as we're approaching the internet development. It's not something that we're scared of. Rob, I think I misunderstood you. I thought you were against it. But neither you nor Anthony are against it. No. So I'm glad to hear that.
In the right hands, it's the potential is enormous for space exploration, the medical domain, and every sphere of endeavor in human existence. It's transformed our lives. But in the wrong hands, as I have mentioned, which I do talk about in my science fiction, it could be used to manipulate the mind control, brain scanning, as I have mentioned before, and so forth. These are the problems that I have. Is if it gets into the wrong hands, it could be used to manipulate the mind through nanochips, storing all encephalic data and so forth. And as I mentioned before, the whole fusion of brain and AI nanotechnology, human brain internet interface connecting neurons and synapses in the brain to the vast internet and so forth. These are things that concern me, because you're effectively creating a new entity. You're dehumanizing somebody. Not to mention, how could a brain suddenly receive all this external information, sensory overload? So there are so many things to consider, not only scientifically, but ethically as well.
You're right. The ethical part there is very important.
So the problem is actually much more near term than you think. Where AI has proven to be incredibly effective is in sales. And if you think about how sales works, it is a manipulative mechanism. It gets you to buy something you otherwise wouldn't have bought, or to subscribe to something you otherwise wouldn't have subscribed. And imagine its application in terms of politics. It could be devastating. And you can create an AI, and the reason why it's so effective is it doesn't get mad, it doesn't lose its temper. It takes into account every piece of information it has on you, and then it uses that information to manipulate you to its ends, as whatever it's programmed to do. And it only has the ethics that's been programmed into it. So if you wanted to manipulate a population, an AI is an absolutely awesome tool. And of course, the scariest use of AI is mutual assured destruction. You recall when we put in the nuclear weapons programs, there was a series of problems where in testing, the people that were supposed to push the button didn't push the button because they were afraid of the damage that was going to occur. Now you say that might be a good thing, but that completely voided the mutually assured destruction mechanism, because if the other side believes you're not going to push the button, they're more likely to push theirs, which is the problem. And so the U.S. and Russia both put in programs so those people really can't say no, but they still kind of could. So it seems obvious that then you'd put an AI in charge of that program, because an AI is going to do what you tell it to do, and it's not going to have an issue. Well, what if the leader of the country that's pushing the button has decided he's going to be forced out of power and he's on a suicide march? Now he doesn't care if he lives or dies, and being pushed out of power, he doesn't care if the country even survives him. He wants everybody to die with him. Well, now you've got a mechanism that allows him to do that, and that kind of thing keeps me up at night, because there are clearly people that believe really strongly that if they're dead, it doesn't matter if everybody else lives or not. And you do not want that person anywhere near a button that could cause the end of the planet. And you don't want a mechanism that would create that kind of outcome, because there are those people in the world. Yet that's a likely use of AI, because it addresses the core problem of mutually assured destruction, in that somebody might balk. The AI won't balk. So in the end, and that goes back to war games, if you saw that movie, in the end, we've got to be really careful how we implement this, but recognize that if Russia were to implement this tomorrow, the U.S. would have it implemented within a week. Because if one side does it, the other side has to follow, and there we would have serious problems. And I do not see any way to stop that from happening. And that would be my biggest concern with regard to AI, is a weapons race where the decisions are predicated on what the other side does to assure you reach parity, not realizing what you're doing is creating a fast path up to obliteration. And that's where I think the risk for AI in defense is.
Let's just come back to human behavior for a moment. I'll just
then
say,
Sharif's back, and we're probably going to have to close off because we're way over time. But go ahead.
I'll just say very quickly, Rob, nobody on this planet, including the President of the United States, has the ability to just push a button. There is a number of steps that and a number of people that it has to go through before nuclear weapons are actually launched. But Anthony, just to your point about the manipulation of human behavior, although we're not using AI as such at the moment, we know that we have psychologists that look at this. We know that casinos, for example, design the slot machines or pokie machines with certain colors that can be hypnotic to some gamblers. We know that food companies use certain colors in order to make you feel hungry and want to eat their food. I mean, this is like an advancement on what we already do, and how big corporations are already manipulating us in our everyday behavior. The fact that you want fresh food when you first walk into a shopping center or into a grocery store, fresh food's located on one place, and other items are located in other places, and they're on a certain shelf height and all that sort of stuff. These are all things that we're already seeing companies do.
Absolutely, no question about that. It's all mind games and psychology and so forth. But having a nanochip implanted into your brain, storing all encephalic data, is taking it to another level, as I have mentioned before. So yes, of course, they're using psychological dynamics, if you like, is at play in everyday life. But what I've spoken about takes it to another level, where AI, nanochips implanted into the brain, as I mentioned, the fusion of brain and AI, nanotechnology, human brain internet interface, and so forth. So that's taking it to another step. But yes, of course.
So it still could happen much sooner.
We're already being manipulated.
What if the brains are those of people that take decisions with more time?
Everything. Dr. Sharif, I'm turning it over to you so you can give us the closeout. It's all about you, Dr. Sharif.
Well, I want to hear what Talib said for a second. What was it, Talib? What was it?
No, I was saying, what if the brain that's manipulated is that of a leader, in your country, particularly?
Exactly.
Somebody that has to take a decision in that.
Well, and I think we saw that with our previous president, Trump. His view of what was going on was vastly different than I think a lot of our view of what was going on, and his decisions are predicated on that view. And we certainly see with regard to different news programs, whoever follows the news programs, their beliefs on what's going on are very different based on the programming they're receiving in the news programs, and so you can get that kind of bias change based on the information that you've got. And if we were able to create that advanced man-machine interface, if somebody could seize that interface and just provide you with the information that they're curating, then they could certainly manipulate you into believing whatever it is that you wanted to believe. But yeah, manipulating religious leaders would be a priority.
Yeah.
Excuse me, political leaders would be a priority.
That's right. That's what worries me. That's what.
Dr. Sharif, you need to close this out, otherwise we'll be here all morning.
Dr. Sharif, how are we doing?
I mean, we can go on if you like.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Hi.
I'm fine. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.